He sat in his car outside the apartment building, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. The eviction notice was folded in his jacket pocket. 3 days. That's all he had left. The engine was off because he couldn't afford to waste gas. It was January, and the cold seeped through the windows like it had a personal grudge. He watched his breath fog up the glass and thought about how pathetic it all was. 32 years old, sleeping in a Toyota Camry, showering at the gym when he could scrape together enough for a day pass. His phone buzzed. Another missed call from his mother. He couldn't answer. What would he even say? That her son, the one who promised he'd make something of himself, was about to be homeless. That every business idea he'd tried had crashed and burned. He closed his eyes and leaned his head back against the seat. For a moment, he let himself imagine just driving away. Leaving everything behind. Starting over somewhere nobody knew his name or his failures. But he didn't have enough gas money to make it out of state. The first business had been a landscaping company. He'd saved for 2 years working construction, bought used equipment, printed flyers, built a website. For 6 months, he worked 16-hour days, underbid every competitor. Then the truck broke down. The repair cost more than he had. By month 7, he was selling the equipment at a loss just to pay rent. The second attempt was a food truck. He and his girlfriend at the time pooled everything they had. She believed in him back then, said he had vision. They found a good corner downtown, figured out the permits, spent weeks perfecting 3 signature dishes. Opening day, the health inspector shut them down over a ventilation code they didn't know existed. The fix would cost $8,000 they didn't have. His girlfriend left 2 weeks later. Said she couldn't watch him destroy himself anymore. He picked up jobs where he could find them. Delivered packages. Worked overnight at a warehouse. Drove for a rideshare app until his car started making expensive sounds. Every paycheck disappeared before he could deposit it. Rent, food, gas, the phone bill he kept because he told himself he needed it to find work. His younger brother bought a house that year. Posted pictures on social media, smiling with his wife in front of a blue Colonial with a 2-car garage. At Thanksgiving dinner, his uncle asked what he was doing these days. He mumbled something vague about freelancing. His uncle nodded slowly, the way you nod at someone you've given up on, and changed the subject. He stopped going to family gatherings after that. The library became his office. Free Wi-Fi, warm in the winter, nobody asked questions if you sat there all day. He'd take his laptop, nurse a thermos of instant coffee, and apply for jobs he was overqualified for. Ones that would barely cover rent but at least offered stability. He got 3 interviews in 2 months. All 3 rejected him. One hiring manager actually said he seemed like a flight risk, someone who'd leave the moment something better came along. He wanted to laugh. Something better. As if that existed anymore. At night, lying in the back seat of his car with a sleeping bag pulled up to his chin, he'd stare at the dome light and do the math. If he worked 2 full-time minimum wage jobs, he could afford a room somewhere. Maybe save a little. Maybe in 5 years, 10 years, he could try again. But the thought of giving up made his chest feel hollow. He remembered being 17, watching his father drive away in a rusted pickup truck. His dad had worked factory jobs his whole life, came home exhausted, died at 56 from a heart attack at his kitchen table. At the funeral, people said he was a hard worker, a provider, a good man. Nobody said he was happy. He'd promised himself back then that he'd be different, that he'd build something, that his life would mean more than a paycheck and a plot at Riverside Cemetery. But promises didn't pay rent. His phone rang one morning while he was brushing his teeth in a gas station bathroom. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. It was a guy named Marcus, someone he'd met 4 years ago at a business seminar he couldn't really afford. They'd grabbed coffee once, talked about startups and risk and the gap between dreaming and doing. Marcus said he'd been thinking about him. Said he remembered the fire in his eyes, the way he talked about ideas like they mattered. Asked if he was still trying to build something, or if life had beaten it out of him yet. He stood there, toothbrush in hand, staring at his reflection in the cracked mirror. Unshaved, exhausted, barely recognizable. He told Marcus he didn't know anymore. Marcus drove 2 hours to meet him at a diner off the interstate. Ordered them both breakfast even though he said he wasn't hungry. Marcus looked good, successful, clean shirt, nice watch, the kind of easy confidence that came from having your life together. He waited for the pity, the charity, the advice that would sound good but mean nothing. Instead, Marcus slid a notebook across the table. Inside were pages of scribbled notes, sketches, half-formed ideas. A business model for a service Marcus wanted to build but didn't have time to run himself. It was simple, connecting small businesses with freelance workers who specialized in digital presence management. For companies too small to hire full-time but too big to ignore the internet. Encanadors, electricians, auto shops, hair salons, local restaurants. Businesses that were good at what they did, but didn't have time or knowledge to deal with social media, respond to online reviews, update websites, manage digital ads. Marcus had thought through everything. The pricing structure, how to recruit qualified freelancers, how to standardize services so they were scalable but personalized, how to measure results so clients saw real value. He closed the notebook slowly. Looked at Marcus across the table. Why me? Marcus leaned back. Because you understand struggle. Most people who have success, they become cautious. Afraid to lose what they have. But someone with nothing to lose. Someone who's already hit rock bottom and is still here. That person fights different. It wasn't a job offer. It was a partnership. Marcus would put up the initial capital, $30,000 to start. Put in the contacts, the connections, help open doors. He would run the day-to-day operations. Build the system. Make it work. They'd split profits 50-50 after Marcus recovered the initial investment. What if I mess it up? The words came out before he could stop them. What if I fail again? Marcus shrugged. Then you fail. I lose some money. Won't break me. But at least you'll have tried. Failure's only permanent if you stop. He looked out the window. People were going about their normal lives. He could join them. Get that safe warehouse job. Stop hurting himself with dreams that seemed always out of reach. But safe was also a prison. Just one with more comfortable bars. He turned back to Marcus. Reached across the table, took the notebook. When do we start? Now, Marcus said. We start now. The first 3 months were brutal. He kept working at the warehouse from 5 in the morning until noon. Then went straight to the small shared office space Marcus had rented. 2 desks, cheap chairs, decent internet. He still slept in the car. Every cent had to go into the business. Marcus had secured 5 clients to start. A auto shop, a nail salon, a carpet cleaning company, a Thai restaurant, a landscaping service. He created profiles for each one. Studied their businesses, their competitors, their ideal customers. Spent nights on YouTube watching tutorials about social media algorithms, search engine optimization, content creation. He hired the first freelancer in week 3. A college student good with graphic design. Then found a retired copywriter who was bored. Then a stay-at-home mom who had digital marketing experience but couldn't find full-time work. The auto shop was the first real test. The owner, Rick, had been skeptical from the start. Said he'd tried internet stuff before and it never worked. During the first 4 weeks, he posted consistently. Car maintenance tips, before and after photos, customer reviews, responded to every comment, every message. Optimized the Google business profile. Week 5, Rick called. Said 3 people had mentioned seeing the shop online. One had brought in a Chevy Tahoe for a complete overhaul. $4,000 job. Rick wanted to continue. But then the Thai restaurant canceled after 6 weeks. The owner said she wasn't seeing results fast enough. She was struggling to pay rent. Couldn't wait. He understood. Didn't argue. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat in the car, looking at spreadsheets until the laptop battery died. He realized the problem at 3 in the morning. He was focusing on the wrong metrics. Likes and followers meant nothing if they didn't translate to people walking through the door. He redid the strategy for all clients. Focused on targeted local ads with specific offers. Started tracking not just followers, but actual calls, website visits, redeemed coupons. Numbers that meant real revenue. Month 2, they got 3 new clients. Month 3, 6. Each one was a battle. He had to prove value every week. Some clients called constantly, wanting to know why they didn't have 1,000 followers yet. Others never responded to messages, then complained they weren't seeing results. He learned to manage expectations. To communicate better. To set realistic goals. To document everything so he could show progress even when it felt slow. Marcus brought in a developer to build a proper platform. Something better than spreadsheets and emails. A system where clients could log in and see their metrics. Where freelancers could receive assignments and mark them complete. The developer cost $10,000. Money they barely had. Marcus didn't blink. Said they either did it right or didn't do it at all. They hired more freelancers. An SEO specialist. An ad manager. A photographer for product shots. The team grew to 8 people, all working remotely, all paid per project. But by month 5, the bank account was dangerously low. Marcus had put in $30,000, and they'd burned through $27,000. Revenue was growing, but not fast enough. Marcus said he could put in more money if needed. But his voice had a note of concern. He stayed up all night running projections. If they continued at the current pace, they'd run out of money in 6 weeks. If they could get 15 more clients in the next month, they'd be in the black. 15 clients. In 4 weeks. The next morning, he went to the warehouse. Talked to the manager. Quit his job. For 6 weeks, he lived on instant ramen and peanut butter sandwiches. Lost 18 pounds. Didn't care. He worked 18 hours a day. Made cold calls. Attended networking events. Visited local businesses in person. Offered free consultations. Showed results from existing clients. He got 12 new clients in 5 weeks. He hired 2 more freelancers he wasn't absolutely sure he could pay. Bet that revenue from new clients would arrive before payments were due. It did. Barely. But it did. And then something started happening. Something he couldn't have planned or forced. Rick from the auto shop told his friend who had a painting company. The friend told his brother-in-law who had a hardware store. The nail salon owner recommended them to 3 other beauty salons in the area. Word of mouth began. Slow at first, like a trickle. Then faster, like a river gaining speed. By month 9, they had 32 clients. Month 10, 47. Month 11, 57. Revenue passed 20,000 in 1 month. Then 30. Then 42. They hired a full-time operations manager. A woman named Sarah who'd worked at a marketing agency and was tired of corporate politics. She systematized everything, created processes, freed him to focus on growth. They moved to a bigger office. A real space with meeting rooms and a small kitchen. There were windows that let in sunlight. In month 12, he signed the lease on his first apartment in 18 months. It was small. Used furniture. In a neighborhood his mother would call developing. But it had walls and a door that locked in a bathroom that was his alone. That first night, he lay on the floor of the empty apartment. He didn't have furniture yet. Just a sleeping bag and the sound of traffic outside. And he cried. Not from sadness or fear or relief. But because for the first time in years, he could see a path forward that didn't end in failure. 2 years later, they were serving 240 businesses across 7 states. Revenue had passed $2 million in the last fiscal year. Marcus had recovered his initial investment 3 times over. They were operating with solid, consistent profit month after month. He wasn't rich. Not yet. But he was paying bills without losing sleep. Had savings that didn't evaporate the day after depositing. Drove a used but reliable Honda Accord. Slept in a real bed in a 1-bedroom apartment with working heat. Simple things. Things most people took for granted. To him, they were miracles. The team had grown to 17 people. 12 freelancers working remotely, 5 full-time employees in the office. Each person represented a life that depended on what he and Marcus had built. Rent that would be paid. Groceries that would be bought. Children that would be fed. His mother called one Sunday morning. She said she'd heard from a cousin that he was doing well. That he had a real business now. Her voice was careful, almost shy. He confirmed. Said yes, he was doing well. Building something. She was quiet for a long moment. I always knew you would make it, she finally said. Always knew you had something special. He didn't respond immediately. He wanted to say that no, she didn't know. That she'd doubted him. That at Christmas 2 years ago, she'd looked at him with pity and disappointment. But what was the point? People rewrote memories to fit the narratives they needed to believe. Thank you, Mom, was all he said. His younger brother Daniel invited him to a barbecue the next month. The first time in over a year. Daniel's house looked even better in person. Perfect lawn, expensive grill in the backyard, patio furniture that probably cost more than his first car. Daniel introduced him as my brother, the entrepreneur. There was genuine pride in his voice now. He talked about the company, about how many employees they had, about expanding to new markets. When everyone left and it was just them cleaning up, Daniel opened 2 beers and they sat on the deck. I didn't think you'd make it, Daniel said suddenly, staring at the beer in his hands. I'm sorry for that, but I really didn't think so. He looked at his brother, saw something vulnerable in his face. I know, he replied. Nobody did, including me, most days. Daniel took a long sip of his beer. You scared me, you know. Always taking risks. Always trying something new. Always failing and getting back up. I couldn't understand why you didn't just get a normal job. Play it safe. He paused. But now I kind of envy you. You built something that's yours. I just work for someone else. Good company, good salary, but it's not mine. Never will be. They sat in silence for a while, just brothers drinking beer under the stars. But the best part, the part he could never explain to someone who hadn't been through it, wasn't the business or the money or the validation or the comparisons finally turning in his favor. It was Monday mornings. He'd wake up, shower in his own shower, make coffee in his own kitchen, drive to an office he'd helped build. He'd walk in and see Sarah already there, working on spreadsheets. See the freelancers logging in remotely, starting their days. See client emails coming in, some with problems, some with thanks, all representing real relationships, real value being created. And he knew he'd built this. Hadn't inherited it. Hadn't gotten lucky. had bled for it, had failed for it, had slept in a car for it, had chosen to continue when every rational reason said to stop. That couldn't be taken from him. Even if the business failed tomorrow, he'd proven something to himself that nobody else needed to understand. He thought a lot about his father in those days. The man who'd worked hard his whole life but never had the chance to build anything of his own. Who'd traded his time for money in factories and warehouses until his body gave up on him. Who'd been a good man, a faithful provider, but who'd died with songs still unsung inside him. He wanted to believe his father was watching from somewhere now and would be proud. Not for the money or the success, but for having tried. For not settling for safe and mediocre. For risking everything to build something that meant something. Marcus walked into his office one Tuesday afternoon, knocked on the door even though it was open. He looked up from a proposal he was reviewing. Marcus looked tired. Good tired, but tired. "I've got something for you," Marcus said, sitting in the chair across the desk. "A company reached out to me. Bigger, much bigger than us. They want to buy what we've built." He felt his stomach tighten. "Buy?" Marcus nodded. "It's not some crazy amount like you see in the news about startups. But it's real. It's life-changing. Enough that we'd both never have to worry about money again. Enough for you to buy a house. Travel. Do whatever you want." "How much?" he asked. Marcus said the number. He felt the air leave his lungs. It was more money than he'd imagined seeing in his entire lifetime. The kind of money that would solve every financial problem he'd ever had. The kind of money that meant he'd really won, undeniably, forever. "I need to think," he managed to say. Marcus nodded. "We have a week to respond. Think it through." That night, he drove. No particular destination, just drove through the city streets as the sun set. He ended up at the gas station where he used to stop when he lived in the car. Same building, same fluorescent lights, same tired-looking attendant behind the counter who probably didn't even remember him. He bought a cup of coffee, walked outside and stood in the parking lot. There was an empty spot near the back where he used to park. Where he'd slept hundreds of nights, scared and broken and almost finished. He stared at that empty space and thought about who he was in that place. And thought about who he was now. The offer was everything he should want. Final proof that he'd won. Security for the rest of his life. Validation nobody could deny. But as he stood there, watching cars pass on the highway, watching people pump gas and buy soda and live their normal lives, he realized something. Victory wasn't the destination. It was the journey. It wasn't about arriving. It was about building. About waking up every day and choosing to create something. About the struggle, the growth, the constant transformation. If he sold now, what would he do? Sit on a beach. Buy things. Rest. He'd already rested. In the back seat of a car. Exhausted from defeat. That wasn't rest. That was giving up in another form. He called Marcus the next morning. "Let's keep building," he said. Marcus laughed on the other end of the line. "I was hoping you'd say that." And they continued.